All right, this time we're working with equations of lines. So for number 1, express the equation of the line through the points -1, 4 and 1, 3 in slope-intercept form. So I wrote down below what point-slope form is and what the slope-intercept form is, because we're going to use this point-slope form to get it into that slope-intercept form here. So to begin with, we're going to have to solve for what our m is. Remember, our m is our slope of our line. So to figure out the slope of the line, did that before, that's where we're subtracting the y values. So we do our y2, which is 3, minus y1, which is 4, over, and then subtract the x's, x2 minus x1. So we get 1 minus a -1. Remember, if you have a double negative, that really changes it to a plus. So here we end up with a -1/2 for our slope here. Once we have the slope, we can plug it into this point slope form, because now we can use one of the points. I'm going to use this first point here. You could certainly use the second point if you prefer. Either way, you'll end up with the same final answer. So here we have y minus, and then our y1 value is the 4, x1 value is our -1. So we have y minus 4 is equal to -1/2, and then our parentheses, x minus our x value, which is -1. So here we'd end up with y minus 4 equals, we still have the -1/2 in front, and then we'd have x plus 1 since we have that double negative, and then we can distribute that -1/2 through to the parentheses. So then we'd have y minus 4 is equal to -1/2 x minus 1/2. So remember, you have to distribute it to everything inside the parentheses. And then add 4 to both sides to finish getting our y by herself. So once you get the y by itself, then we will have it in that slope-intercept form. So here we'd have y equals -1/2 x still, plus, and then this 4, if you write that as a fraction with a common denominator of 2, would be 8/2. So if we do a -1/2 plus 8/2, we get 7/2 there. And once again, you can use your calculator to help double check your answers there and make sure you're doing those fractions correctly. Rewrite this equation off to the side here since it's a little bit squished in there. So we got y equals -1/2 x plus 7/2. And then that would be your final answer in that slope-intercept form, that y equals mx plus b form. And then for number 2, we have to find the equation of a line parallel to 2y plus 1 equals 4x minus 3, passing through the point 1, -2 in slope-intercept form once again. So our final answer, once again, we want to be in that y equals mx plus b form. So here, first of all, we need to figure out what the slope is of this original line. So that way we know what the slope is of our parallel line. So to do that, we want to get it in that slope-intercept form. We want to get y by itself. So to do that, we'd have our 2y plus 1 equals 4x minus 3 that we started out with. And then subtract 1 from both sides. So then we have 2y is equal to 4x minus 4. And then divide both sides by 2 to get y by itself. And here I'm going to divide each separately, so that way we have our x and our constants separate here. So we'd have then y equals 2x minus 2 for this formula, for this original equation. So that means our slope here, our m, which is our slope, is equal to 2. And if we're dealing with a parallel line, parallel lines have the same slope. So we want to use the same slope here. I'm going to write up above here, if it was perpendicular, then instead of a slope of 2, we would have to use the opposite and reciprocal slope. So the opposite sign here would be negative instead of positive. So if it was perpendicular, then instead we would have a negative instead of positive, and then the reciprocal. If you flip 2, 2 is really the same thing as 2 over 1. If you flip that, you get 1/2. So if it was perpendicular instead, then you would have used a slope of negative 1/2. And a lot of times you'll see a symbol of M and then a little perpendicular symbol to mean that you're dealing with the slope of the perpendicular line instead of the original line. Because some of the homework problems will have you do perpendicular, not always parallel. So once you have the slope, so once again, remember in this case we have the same slope since it is parallel, then we can use that same formula as we had for the last one. We have a point and a slope. So we can use our point slope formula. So we have y minus our y value, which is -2. So once again, put that in parentheses, is equal to 2. And then our parentheses x minus our x value, which was 1. So then we'd have a y plus 2 equals 2x minus 2, because once again we have to distribute that 2 through to the parentheses. And then to finish getting y by itself, we would subtract 2 from both sides to get the 2's to cancel out on the left side. So then we get y equals 2x minus 4 for our final answer here. So once again, make sure that you are careful whether it's asking for parallel or perpendicular. And if you do have questions, make sure to ask like normal.